You are very welcome to our webinar here this evening. For anyone that doesn't know me, my name is Rachel Dunne, and I've been with Portobello since 2018, coming on 6 years. So I'm delighted to introduce our speakers this evening. Our keynote speaker for the evening is Dr. Pete King. Pete is an international expert in play work and is currently a senior lecturer in Swansea University. He also leads the MA in Childhood Studies and Developmental and Therapeutic Play. It's an honour to have Pete here this evening. Pete was my lecturer in Swansea when I did my own master's, so he had a significant role in shaping my career. So we're delighted to have Pete here with us to share his wealth of knowledge and experience. And then our next speaker is the wonderful Leah Ahern. Leah is currently studying with myself and Margarita on the Masters in Early Childhood Studies. And Leah will do a talk for us tonight on how play supports children's well-being. So just a little bit of housekeeping. There will be a recording available after the session. It'll be up in the next few days, and CBT certs will be sent out in due course. So I'll pass it on to Pete now to start our great evening, and enjoy.
Thanks, Rachel. Thank you for the kind words. And am I allowed to say you were my favourite student? I mean, hey, all my students are my favourite student, but you know. Okay, what I'll do is I will just try and share my screen. Hopefully, everyone can you see the screen?
Someone coming up there? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for Rachel and everyone to invite me to have a bit of a chinwag about how play can support the well-being in young children. And what I'm going to focus on is this aspect we call the process of play and how it relates to well-being. As Rachel said, I'm senior lecturer at Swansea University. I've been there since 2013 teaching, but I did my PhD there in 2008, and I was looking at children's perception of choice in their play. When we think about well-being, I quite like this sort of triangle pyramid that Roberts came up with. And we got the sort of the physical well-being, the impact of the external physical world on our internal sense of well-being. And it sort of forms the foundation, the basis. And as we grow and develop, communication becomes important. And the thing with communication, it doesn't have to be just verbal communication, it's the non-verbal communication. And it then leads into this aspect of us feeling a sense of being and belonging. And this is sort of our state of well-being. And through our physical well-being, our communication, we sort of develop our sense of self. And at the top of the triangle or the pyramid, we have agency, and this state of well-being about internal influences and decision making, about our own control that we have of who we are and what we can do in this world. And I'm not sure if everybody in the webinar tonight has been involved in professional practice or are in professional practice. But I always think it's useful to put things in context. So I'm going to give a slight warning before I show the next slide, because that is me in 1997 or 98. That's the first after school club that I ran in Oxford. As you can see, I had a little bit more hair there, but I was wearing a hat. And it was a middle school system in Oxford. So this was a school that had 4 to 9-year-olds. So it sort of covered the early years spectrum, but also moved into sort of the early childhood up to sort of the age of 8. And I fell into the role by chance. I studied to be a secondary school teacher. Wasn't my vocation, but it's one of these transferable skills that I suddenly got involved in running after school club, and children's play became my world. And as I say, this photograph is about 78, 78 I'm talking about, 97, 98. And I'm sure there's a lot of you probably in the webinar thinking I wasn't born then, which does make me feel quite old. However, at this time, two people called Gordon Starrick and Perry Ouse published this conference paper called the Colorado paper. And it's play and play work as therapeutic space. And it's just by chance that as I started my career in play and play work, this theory came out, and it basically has come with me. I've grown up with my professional practice and my research and my qualifications being underpinned by this aspect that we call the play cycle. And it focuses on play as a process, not worrying as play as an outcome, because we can use play in education, that's fine. We can use play in play therapy, that's fine. We can use play in other therapeutic contexts like hospital play. However, when we focus just on the process of play, we have this aspect that we call the play cycle. And I'm going to briefly just go over it, and then I'm going to show it again in a very short video. But basically, if we think about the play space, so it could be a room, a playground, it could be the space under a table. And we've got the child on the left-hand side, or my left-hand side, and in the corner we've got adults and other children, and we've got cardboard boxes, natural elements, tree, things that have been made. There's the bricks, we've got animals. And so within this play space, we got the outer world, these objects, but the child also has their own inner world, their inner thoughts, their subjective thoughts. And they perceive what's in the play space. And we call these loose parts. I'm sure you come across the concept of the loose parts. Simon Nicholson, around about 1971, he published a paper. He called it the best title paper I've ever come across, The Theory of Loose Parts, How Not to Cheat Children. I don't think that as a title of the paper has been surpassed. But basically, these loose parts are perceived by the child. We got this concept called affordances. It's Gibson. I'm not going to know too much around it. I'm just giving you sort of some terms. You can look them up later on, or you can get in contact with me. But the child picks up what's in the external space, and what it can do is it can stimulate an idea or thought to play. We call this the pre-cue. The pre-cue, we can't see it. It's in the child's inner world, but what we can see is the cue to play, or what we term the play cue. And hopefully the play cue gets picked up, and it could be picked up by other children in the play space, could be the attending adult in the play space, or it could be an object that the child issues a cue to the object and they get the object, and we call this the play return. And this goes back to the child's inner world, and this is what forms the play cycle. And when children are in a play cycle, play cues and returns continue to happen. We call this concept flow. And as the play cycle forms, it's bounded in this sort of frame, or what we call the play frame. And basically the play frame enables that the play cycle stays intact, the meaning of the play to the child, what they're doing. And as long as the play frame is maintained, the play cycle can continue. And often the adult role is to try and maintain that play frame doesn't get disturbed. And the adult can take on many different roles. The first one we call play maintenance, and it's situated outside the play frame, but in the play space. And this is where the adult's taking on what we term an observer role. Because there's this notion often when we work with children and young people that if we're not actively involved with them, we're not doing our job, we're being lazy. But actually, if we're supporting children's play and the process of play, the less we do sometimes, the better the job that we're doing, because children will naturally play. It's just that when they're in a play space where there's adults, so it could be a preschool, could be a nursery, could be an after school club, a holiday play scheme, or a school. Thinking about break times, recess times, there's always adults around. So if the adult is just observing, maintaining that play cycle is not getting disrupted, that the play frame stays intact, they're doing a job. The difference being is that if you're doing play maintenance role and you're on your phone sending text messages, then I think you've got an answer to be criticised for. However, we do this, we do an observing role, and it's actually good for reflective practice as well. The second aspect where we support the play cycle is this thing called simple involvement. And here we act more as a resource. So for example, when I was running my after school club, I would have, say, all the art and crafts materials available on the table, and a child's doing some colouring and is looking for a blue pen, can't find a blue pen. So they come up to me asking for a blue pen. I can find them one. That will keep their play cycle going, they keep their play frame intact, and all I'm doing is acting as a resource. So I'm sort of dipping in to the frame, but not actually active in the play cycle. And that's the thing with play maintenance and simple involvement. As an adult, we take quite a passive role. If we are actually issued a cue and we give the return and we're actually part of the play cycle, we call this medial intervention. So an example of this is that again, in my after school club, a child comes up to me with 2 tennis rackets and a ball. They hand me a racket. They don't even say anything. They just give me the racket. I know that's a cue, a non-verbal cue that they want to play. By taking the racket and asking them or giving a signal for them to hit the ball to me, I'm active in the play cycle. Sometimes as an adult, we might see children who could be just sort of standing around, and actually it's not a bad thing that we as adults provide the play cue. We invite children into a play cycle, because often what happens is that, again, I experienced my after school club, I would cue someone in to game. Say maybe I had the 2 rackets and I gave one to a child who I see standing around on their own. Often what happens is that when other children see me playing with a child, it becomes a magnet for them to come and watch. And often what we used to do was, as we're playing, I would then give my racket to a child and say, oh, you take over. So actually we get children playing and we withdraw. So we go from medial intervention, simple involvement where I'm handing the racket as a resource to someone else, and then I'm into play maintenance. I'm just observing. The final one is complex intervention. This is a very difficult one to actually do in professional practice because it takes a lot of your time and it's difficult to do it in large groups of children. And the aspect of complex intervention is that you're in this sort of deep play. It could be a role play or fantasy play. You're taking on a character. And within this, both the adult and the child are issuing play cues. I would say that the complex intervention is often used in play therapy because the adult and the child are working on a one-to-one and the adult's involved in the children's play. We do it, I say, I would say on occasion, but it's difficult to do because if you're in complex intervention, it's taking all your thoughts, your time and everything else. And if we're in early years or if we're in any sort of play context where there's large groups of children, it's difficult to give that one-to-one or small group work when you've got all these other children that you need to be looking out for and taking care of. So that's sort of a whistle stop of what the play cycle is, and this is about the process of play. So how does this relate to well-being? Well, I'm based in Wales, and 2019, we going into 2020, we had COVID, and everything shut down. All the schools had to sort of have some form of childcare for key working children and vulnerable children. And in Wales, there's one local authority, Torfaen Borough Council, and they have these wonderful people called play workers. And play workers focus on the process of play. But what Torfaen did was, during COVID, the play workers were employed still because they were supporting the children in the primary schools in the hubs that were forming. So 3 or 4 schools would then form a hub. One school would have the children, and they would rotate all the teaching staff. So the children didn't know which adult they were going to have in their hub each day. However, in Torfaen, they changed the play workers and called them well-being play workers. And they actually went into the schools to support the teaching staff. Now, having different children from different schools suddenly just being in one hub wasn't new to these guys, because they run holiday play schemes. And often a holiday play scheme will be in a primary school, but children from all other schools would come because it was during the vacation time. So suddenly being asked to go into a school where you would have children you don't know who you're going to have each day wasn't nothing new for the wellbeing play workers. However, for the teaching staff, it was a different sort of experience, because then, you know, quite rightly, teachers would get used to going into their own classroom, having the same group of children, know who they're going to be there, and suddenly this whole different sort of scenario took place because of COVID. And what actually happened was that the head teachers suddenly realised that the play workers were in a better position to run these hubs than the teachers. And that's what happened. And what they did was they designated the same wellbeing play workers to each hub, because there was about, I think, 9 hubs around the Torfaen area. So the children who were in the hub, because they had to be there because their parents were key workers, blue light workers, or anybody in retail or something. But the children would know which adult was going to be there, because it was a designated same group of people. I mean, they still had to work in bubbles and things like this. And when I came across this, because I did some research around the impact of COVID on play and play work, and I did it as COVID was happening, I suddenly realised that something quite special was going on here. So I got in touch with them, and I did some interviews with the head teachers of the schools that were involved in the hubs having the wellbeing play workers. And I asked them, you know, I did some interviews and everything else. And I said, you know, what is it about the wellbeing play workers coming into school? And they said, well, the first thing was they suddenly became part of the school team, but they were running the lockdown hubs. They were in control of those hubs, the wellbeing play workers. They were using play, focusing on the process of play. And so they sort of had the control, or because sort of the aspects of autonomy. The other aspect was they formed strong relationships already with the children, but even stronger with the children, but it actually extended with the staff and the school. The staff suddenly realised what the wellbeing play workers were doing. They saw the positive impact it was having on the children through this very, very difficult time. And the other thing the head teachers they talked about was the quality of the service, the how adaptable the wellbeing play workers were, how trained they were, and the resources that were provided. And when Rachel asked me about doing this webinar tonight and thinking about play and well-being, this aspect came that I thought this is an example on quite a difficult time that we all had in the world, where actually the play workers, the well-being play workers using the process of play were supporting children at quite a very difficult moment of our lives. And this sort of then got me thinking about this aspect that I've come across before. I use this in my own PhD thesis, and it's a thing we call self-determination theory. And it's this aspect Desai and Ryan developed. Ryan and Desai, depending on which paper you read of those, they've written loads of things. But there's three basic psychological needs: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. And I put this quote up because it's one of my favourite quotes that I found of those. And basically, what Desai and Ryan was saying is that it seems that when people are more able to satisfy all three of their basic psychological needs, autonomy, competence, relatedness, the regulation of their behaviour will be characterised by choice, volition and autonomy rather than pressure, demand and control. And so if we've got choice, volition and autonomy, then that's got to contribute to our well-being and how we cope with the world, how we address the world. And it starts when we start interacting with the world. And so if we go back to Roberts's pyramid, we got the physical well-being, the communication, belonging and boundaries and agency. And we can actually sort of think, well, when we talk about agency, we're talking about autonomy. When we talk about belonging and boundaries and communication, we're talking about relatedness. And when we talk about physical well-being, we're talking about competence. So actually, those three aspects that Desai and Ryan come up about our psychological needs, autonomy, relatedness, and competence, we can relate to Roberts's pyramid. But then if we go back to what the head teachers were saying about the well-being play workers, part of the school team ran the lockdown hubs, autonomy, strong relationships, relatedness, quality service, competence. So actually, the well-being play workers were supporting these three basic psychological needs, but actually they were doing them themselves. And I think it shows the importance of play, that play can contribute throughout a child and a young person and indeed an adult's life, particularly if we focus on these three aspects of autonomy, competence and relatedness. So I've always been quite passionate about the play cycle. The other thing I should sort of just say is that when I became my first after school club and then I realised I was becoming a play worker, I actually, once I got into the play cycle, Gordon Sturrock ran a therapeutic play work course and I did that. So I actually consider myself as a therapeutic play worker. I'm not a play therapist. I don't set up play to meet some kind of outcome to hopefully address a child's needs or for them to face sort of any issues or work out any issues, anything else. Because I believe that the play space is the natural healing space, is what Sturrock and else was saying in the Colorado paper. And actually, just by providing that resource, that space, the chance for children to play, is actually has that natural contribution to their well-being. And as an adult, we can support it. And I think that's what the Torvine well-being play workers do. They support these different aspects. What I want to do is just show you a short video of the play cycle, just to put everything that we're sort of saying in a brief context. It's only a couple of minutes, so hopefully this will work all right.
Play space will consist of their subjective internal world and the objective external world of people and objects. We can collectively call the people and objects in the external world loose parts. Children will perceive the external world through their senses. A loose part may stimulate play. We call this an external perceptual cue, and the loose parts afford different reasons for children to play. An external perceptual cue may stimulate a thought or idea to play. This is called the pre-cue. The pre-cue is internal, but is emitted to the external world as a play cue, which can be verbal or non-verbal and is a signal to play. The play return is a positive response to the play cue and can be from another person or an object. The play return goes back to the child's inner world and the play cycle is formed. Within an established play cycle, play cues and play returns continue and children can get lost in their play. We call this flow. The play cycle may take up the whole of the play space, or just a small part and is bounded within the play frame. The adult can support the play cycle in one of 4 ways and does not control or take over the play cycle, or what is termed adulteration. The first is play maintenance, where the adult takes on an observer role. The second is simple involvement, where the adult acts as a resource. For both play maintenance and simple involvement, the adult has a passive role in the play cycle. The third is medial intervention, where the adult provides a play return to a child's play cue and is a play partner in the play cycle. The fourth is complex intervention, where both the child and adults may be issuing play cues and giving play returns in an established play cycle. Both medial intervention and complex intervention have the adult being more active in the play cycle. Eventually, the play cycle ends. This is called annihilation. That is the play cycle in a nutshell.
Okay, that is pretty much me finished. I think that's pretty much on my 25 minutes as well. So I very much thank you for your time. What I would say is, if you've got any other questions after the webinar, please do email me. My email address is just coming up now. All these papers that relate to the play cycle are available free. There is the book that I did with Gordon Sturrock just before he passed away. And also, if you're interested in watching the video again, if you go on YouTube and just put in Dr. Pete King and the play cycle, you can watch the videos free as well. So I think that is me done.
Pete, thank you so much.
That's all right.
A blast from the past there. Let me just see. I know there is hands up for questions, but we are going to come back to questions at the end. Thank you very much for that, Pete. Can we pass you on to Leah now? Are you all right to share yours, Leah?
Yeah, all good.
And we'll all come back together then at the end for questions.
Now, hopefully you can see this, and I'll just make it nice and big. Okay, so welcome everybody. I'm so glad to be presenting here tonight. I hope you're all doing well. My name's Leah, and I'll be exploring play and well-being in early childhood education this evening. For this webinar, I really wanted to pay focus on the practical side of play and well-being in early years, and specifically harnessing sensory play and empathy for emotional regulation and development. I'm currently completing the MA in Early Childhood Studies with Portobello. However, my background stems from music, so I did my undergrad in music with language, and this was followed then by a Master's of Research And this explored educators' perspectives into music integration in preschool settings. And my own practice within the early years leans heavily on sensory exploration, and this often draws on music as a guide. Through this practice, children within my care, in my setting, engage in multisensory approaches and activities throughout the day and throughout their time with me. So just a little bit of an introduction. Play, as I'm sure you're all aware, is the primary language for children to learn and express themselves. Play it's an integral element of the early childhood education. It's instinctive. It acts as a canvas for children to paint their understanding of the world around them. And it can be, I suppose, a really essential catalyst for a child's holistic development. Play by its nature is multifaceted, and it has a great impact on development across the board. Personally, I work mainly with preschool age children, and they navigate through their various worlds through the medium of play. And, you know, we can see so clearly how this can be so beneficial across the developmental domains. So when considering play through the lens of well-being, it's important to gauge an understanding of well-being within early years education. Well-being is very complex, and it can act as a crucial element throughout childhood. Within early childhood development, well-being is a multi-dimensional construct, and UNICEF outlines that well-being is much more than the absence of illness, but well-being can extend to a child's ability to thrive within their environment, to form meaningful relationships, and to have fulfilling experiences throughout their educational journey. Play and well-being are intrinsically linked in early childhood, and it can serve as a fundamental components that will contribute to a child's overall development as they progress through their educational journeys. So just a few practical perspectives. Within my own practice, I found that it's very beneficial to allow structured and unstructured activities, to allow them to intertwine, and, you know, to really encourage that child-led and emergent curriculum. Having this balance between the child-led and, you know, adult interventions has, you know, it has really helped me to extend a lot of the play experiences within the setting. From Vygotsky's social development theory and Piaget's constructivist approach, this offers a lens to view play as an educational tool. And these theories underpin, I suppose, the structure of, you know, problem solving, play activities, and social interactions as well. And this can form a bridge between a child's curiosities and their structured learning experiences. Play and well-being in early childhood are so deeply interconnected, and it can really enhance the physical, emotional, social, and cognitive well-being of the child. By using active and sensory play as well, you know, this can promote physical health, neurological development, you know, while imaginative and group play then could foster emotional expression and stress reduction and social skills. Through play, really, children can explore their creativity, they can learn problem-solving skills, and they can really build that resilience while all the while contributing really to their overall psychological well-being as well. So a few sensory materials in play. These can really encourage children's perceptions and interactions with their worlds around them, and sensory play can promote neural development by encouraging those synapses, you know, synapse connection, and encouraging that connection for children as they engage with the world around them. Sensory engagement can really encourage cognitive and creative potential, and it can encourage various developmental domains as well, like such as language, social, emotional, physical. Healy and Healy, they have a research study from 2009, and it's linked in the reference list at the end if anyone has any interest to read in further, but their research really emphasizes the role of tactile experiences in the development of the fine motor skills and cognitive development, and that is linked in the reference list at the end if anyone would like to read further. Within my own practice, it's evident that sensory play can be just such an amazing tool. From what I've seen on the ground, you know, it can have a really calming effect for children in the setting where needed, or it can stimulate a particular energy. I can see how sensory engagement can really encourage focus and concentration for children. It can encourage exploration and curiosity. It can be such an amazing tool to promote emotional and behavioural regulation as well. And it can really serve as a useful tool for children who might have some additional needs as well. There was an intervention documented by Ramirez, and this provided support for the integration of daily sensory play. And this resulted in an increase of attention spans and also emotional regulation of children. As I've outlined, within my own professional practice, I've observed similar outcomes, and particularly in terms of focus and that reduced behavioural disruptions as well within the setting. When we hear sensory materials, the mind often jumps straight away to fidget toys and materials that encourage tactile stimulation or, visually pleasing resources as well. And I think because of my background in creative work, I feel very strongly about considering all of the 5 senses when we're encouraging sensory play. And even though sometimes that can feel really overwhelming to include them all, can we explore sensory materials that incorporate taste, smell, and hearing, as well as the sight and touch? For me, this will often present itself as sound and sonic exploration. That might be through found sounds within our outdoor environment or our indoor environment, or maybe through the music we use within the setting, navigating through the individual soundscape of each child's daily life. As well then as incorporating, various scents or smells in the setting, encouraging water play, sand play, messy play, and so on. So emotional regulation through play. Sensory play can support children's social and emotional development, and particularly through emotional regulation. For many years, I've been severely inspired by the practices of Fred Rogers' philosophies. Rogers was a creator and host of Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, and I would highly recommend taking a look at some of the content. You can find it on YouTube. If you look up Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood, it is a truly amazing model of television for young children. And Rogers advocated for children's education and emphasized the role of play in helping children to express and manage their emotions. Within my own practice, I have seen it. It's so clear on how play can support emotional regulation. For example, this could be through conflict resolution during group play. It could be reinforcing a child's capacity for self-regulation and also for emotional intelligence as well. The fundamental roots of empathy can also be navigated through early childhood development. Brownell highlights how play-based activities, and particularly ones that would involve role play and sharing of perspectives, how these can be instrumental in fostering self-awareness. And this can be closely linked to empathy in young children. Within my own practice, I've seen how play can support empathy development by allowing children to explore and understand, I suppose, various perspectives and emotions through role play and through social interaction as well. Often in group play, children will learn to recognize and to respond to the feelings of others, by practicing cooperation and negotiation as well through this. And children can step forward into these various roles within dramatic play, and this can help to develop an understanding of the various viewpoints and emotional experiences of others too. Immersive play experience then, on the other hand, can really cultivate that sense of empathy by providing a space for children to directly engage with feelings and perspectives of their peers, and it can enhance their ability to connect with and also to understand others on a deeper level. When I was doing some research for this, I was looking a lot at the theory of mind. And a theory of mind highlights that others' beliefs or desires or intentions or emotions or thoughts, they might be different from one's own experiences here. And play can serve as a really crucial element for developing a theory of mind. Through guided play, children can learn to decipher different perspectives and intentions of others. Dunne and Cutting note that this skill is very vital for social interaction. And during the early years, the seeds of cognitive empathy, these can be sown. And, play can act as the sun and the water for these seeds to nurture the child's empathetic growth. Sensory play as well can contribute significantly to the development of this theory of mind. And through sensory play, children will then engage in activities that will stimulate the senses and encourage interaction with peers through a shared context. And this interaction can really encourage social communication, and it can give a deeper insight into perspectives. Like, children might describe their sensory experiences, they might listen to how others perceive the same materials or the same resources. They might negotiate the roles or the rules of the play scenarios as well. And as children navigate through these various social situations, they begin to understand the various outlooks and experiences of others, and it can lay the groundwork then for, recognizing diverse perspectives. Sensory play can really enhance that cognitive development and emotional skills such as problem solving and empathy, and these can be crucial for an understanding of other people's internal experiences. And sensory play can, enrich the child's sensory development and play a really vital role in advancing their social cognition and their empathy. And these are key components of theory of mind. It's important as well to curate a secure environment where children can feel physically and emotionally safe and secure. The Reggio Emilia approach is it's a good example for this, because it highlights the significance of the environment within learning. Hewitt explores this pedagogy, and it outlines how a stress-free environment can support a child's sense of security, and it can also promote cognitive abilities as well and encourage a real love for learning. The Reggio Emilia approach, it enhances sensory play, and this can be through the environment by creating rich and engaging spaces, and these can invite exploration with all of the senses. The Reggio Emilia educational philosophy, it really emphasizes the importance of offering children a variety of materials and experiences that can be visually appealing and stimulating to, tactile senses as well, like such as using natural objects, art supplies, construction materials, and incorporating elements like light and shadow and texture and color into the classroom too. And also the outdoor environments as well. Children are encouraged to touch, to see, to smell, hear, and also, where appropriate, to taste as well. And this can really facilitate a deeper understanding of the world around them. The Reggio Emilia approach views the environment as a key facilitator of learning, as the third teacher. And it's designed to provoke questions and discovery and make sensory play a real fundamental part of the curriculum. And this intentional way of designing the curriculum, it creates an atmosphere where children can explore freely and engage in creative problem solving and develop their sensory skills in a really meaningful context as well. Oopsies, sorry. So just to go back onto my last slide there. So when we're integrating play and learning, it considers the, integration in various contexts. I have a link there in my references as well for Shaw and Ginsberg, and they outline how play is not just, it doesn't just supplement learning, but it's very fabric. And play-based learning strategies can really transform these traditional learning structures and engage children in a way that's both natural and exciting as well. It's important to remember that play is not separate from learning, but it's an essential part of learning. And through engaging with these sensory materials and experiences as well, children can develop a real heightened awareness of their own emotions and the emotions of their peers, and this can lay the groundwork for empathy. And this immersive form of play supports emotional development, and it allows children to explore and express feelings in a controlled environment and enhance their ability really to, I suppose, understand and regulate those emotions effectively. Okay, thanks everybody for listening, and I hope you have enjoyed it, and do put your questions in the chat box if you've any, and there's a list of references there if anybody would like to have a look at them at the end.
Leah, thank you so much.
No bother.
Another lovely presentation this evening. I could listen to both of you all evening because you're focusing on things that I love, both in a professional and a personal context. I think what really came across for me in both of your kind of sessions was the power of play. Yeah, so that idea of process over product, and something that you said, Leah, there at the end, that play is not separate from learning. It's such a crucial part of it, and the skills learned when focused on process focused rather than product focused. And like Pete said there, the power of play really came true during COVID times. I mean, people had to get very imaginative, really playful, which can be quite difficult for people, I think, when they're not in the kind of the sector or the context that we're in. So thank you both very much. I'm going to go on to questions first. Leah, we have one for you first. Let me see here. What role do play materials and resources have in facilitating meaningful and enriching play experiences for children in early education? And how can educators ensure access to these kind of materials?
This is a really good question, as I think a lot of the time we can get very lost in supplying materials and purchasing materials. I would say go to your natural things first if you can, because, you know, it can be really costly, especially if you're running a setting as well by yourself. It can be a real big stress. But I do think leaning to things like going into your environment, have a look at what can you explore. Can we explore the outdoor area? Can we lean on natural elements like, you know, having a nature table? Can we explore sound and texture through leaves, through soil, through whatever is at the ready? And then if you are going down the route of, I suppose, purchasing things, looking at things that are really long lasting, like for example, our tough trays and our water tables, you know, that we can kind of change them up and use them time and time again. But materials can be really vital to this, but also have a look at what you have available to you, and things that you can make your life easier, I suppose. So I hope that answers your question.
Thanks, Leah. I have one for you now, Pete. How can educators address potential challenges or barriers to implementing play-based approaches in early education? So time constraints, maybe curriculum expectations, or concerns about school readiness?
Blimey. Oh, that's a question, isn't it? I'm not an educator. And I think that trying to implement something around the process of play is actually very difficult, because you've got not only your own policies and procedures, but you've also got your government legislation, you've got your education policies, and what has been found, and this I'd say would apply across the UK, but Elizabeth Wood talked about this a lot, was that a lot of practitioners want to do play this way, but they're actually being constrained because the policies, procedures, the curriculum, the legislation, everything else says play has got to be done this way. However, one thing I'm looking into is how can the process of play relate to play-based learning? And there's this lovely paper by Pyle and someone else that I use because I teach the play module for my our undergraduate students at Swansea who are doing early childhood studies. And they did a study with practitioners, and they've got a continuum where you've got at one end your what we term your free play, your child-led play. You then got the other end of the continuum, which is the adult-led play, which is trying to meet learning outcomes and attainment targets. And in the middle, you've got collaborative play, where the child and the adult are working together or playing together. And if you use that model and say, well, I want to focus on the child-led, well, if it's going to be child-led, the children have got to take control of the play. They've got to take control of the play cycle. However, if you've got the collaborative, well, you've got the aspect of medial intervention where the adult and the child are playing together. Another aspect of that is Siraj Blatchford's sustained shared thinking, where it's about how through play, both the child and the adult are sharing their thoughts and everything else. Well, it can only happen if the child has control, or some control, if not all control of the play, and the adult's supporting it. So what I would say is use that as your theoretical model to justify what you're doing, because it's play-based learning. It's one of these that I think difficult for educators, because you've got to show the evidence of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And I don't think we're ever going to win that one. But I like the aspect that Leah was saying about play and learning are not separate. And it always brings me back to a chap called Bob Hughes. He was a play worker. And if we want to live and breathe in this world, we need oxygen. And what Hughes said was, well, actually what play is the psychological equivalent of oxygen. Because if we're not playing, we're not going to have that aspect to learn, or have that aspect of well-being, or have that aspect of sense of belonging and everything else. And so I think if you can try and focus on the child-led aspect, the free play aspect within the play-based curriculum, then at least that gives you a bit of a chance. Sorry if it's a long-winded answer, but that's the only way I can sort of address this.
No, and I think, do you know, there's another question here, and I think you've dipped into it as well. How can educators effectively integrate play-based learning approaches in early education and the curriculum to support children's holistic development and well-being while meeting curriculum standards? I think you've touched on that significantly there. I suppose, what do you think of that, Leah? Do you want to jump in on that as well?
I would tend to like wholeheartedly agree with you on a lot of what you're saying, Pete. Like I remember doing a module when I was doing my undergrad, but it was focusing on early years music with children, and it was called Let the Children Play. Now it was in the context of let the children play and explore music, but I think that idea of just let them play, like a lot of the time when we can use our skills as, whether that's a practitioner, an educator, a play worker, using our skills to observe and to maybe include a provocation, to maybe provoke something, or maybe we can lean on particular interests the child is presenting with, we can then extend that learning. So, you know, they might come so far with it and we come in then and we extend it. So having that idea of that we're there to facilitate learning and facilitate play by extending what they've already started doing, you know, that we're not cutting something short. We're really looking at how can we take this idea and expand on it to, you know, encourage learning, or maybe to dip into our curriculum standards and looking at how can we bring our standards and our, you know, our goals, how can we bring them into the play rather than the other way around. I hope that makes sense.
Can I just jump in with a lovely music metaphor, Leah, because I think the purest form of music relating to play is improvised jazz, because you have people who just go in with their instruments with no set music, no set pattern. Someone starts playing. It's a bit like I have been to Dublin. I have been to a couple of pubs where people just come in with their instruments and they sit in the corner and they start playing. That, for me, is the purest form of play for adults in music, because no one's telling them what to do. But what gets created is magical. Yeah. And that's what children can do if they're left with the loose parts, those senses you talked about. That's the whole aspect of affordances and having that external experience of the environment.
Yeah, and just to jump in on top of that again, I mentioned Fred Rogers as I was going along there, and he has a quote, and I probably won't get it absolutely right, but it's something along the lines of, you know, we don't stop learning. We don't start learning when we stop playing. we often stop learning when we stop playing, you know, so trying to integrate them together and really giving play its space as an equal part, I suppose, of the overall goals of the setting can be really important.
I'm going to just throw a question in left field now. Do you think maybe in terms of the early education context, that really reinforces the importance of partnership with parents a little bit? Because Pete, you were talking about that idea of, you know, having kind of evidence for whatever. But if you were to talk to the parents and have that kind of relationship with them as to, this is why we're doing this, you know, if you have any ideas, I know a lot of students use something called stay and play, where the parents actually come in and get involved in a play session with the children and the educators, which is lovely as well. So do you think parental involvement would have any fit in there?
Can I throw something in with that one? Can I go in before you, Leah? Is that all right? I tell you what. Swansea University a few years ago was awarded the British Science Festival, and as academics we were invited to put in a proposal, get some money to run some workshops. So with a few students, what we did was we had the scrap store providers. Well, we had to pay for it, but that's what I got the grant for. But we had scrap that were the size of buttons to 6-foot totem pole, not poles, rolls, you know, the industrial things that carpets and things and linen are wrapped around. And so we just had a van full of loose parts. And the idea was that parents would come with the children, they would book a 45-minute session. So we had 4 sessions at 45 minutes, but the parents had to stay. It wasn't a childcare facility, it wasn't a dumping ground. If the children were going to be there, the parents had to be. But we set the room up that the adults couldn't sit down on a chair. We only had a few chairs for those that really needed them, but we deliberately had it because I've had enough children's parties where the parents sit on the outskirts while watching all the children in the middle. We weren't going to have that, so we put all the stuff there. As I said, we originally had 45-minute session. The first group of parents and children, once the parents were playing with the children, they were creating the most amazing things. They didn't leave. And we didn't have the heart to say, no, you've got to go now, because they were so engaged with it. That sort of 45 minutes actually turned out one long session. And I think that goes back down to, you can create the environment for it to happen. And one family, they made this 6-7 foot totem pole, and it was brilliant because the children wanted to take it home. We said, yeah, you could take it home. I mean, the looks I got from the parents weren't great. However, the father came back about 10 minutes later and said, really sorry, we can't get it on the bus, and just gave it back to me. But it meant a lot to the children that they made something, and I think particularly because they made something with the parents.
I think their involvement is paramount. I really do. I always have. Leah, what do you think?
Yeah, just I suppose on a practical perspective as well, like having those conversations with parents, and depending on the setting you're in, this can be, you know, varying levels of, it can be very easy to do this, or it can be a little bit more challenging. I'm very lucky, I'm based in a small town, so I know a lot of the parents now, you know, from conversations over the wall, and then, you know, it can go from that informal context of, you know, having a chat about what you're doing to like presenting them with the observations, or, you know, presenting them with, oh, this month we're going to focus on whatever because one of the kids had this idea and we're going to develop this idea. So I think when you have that communication line, it can help you to, I suppose, justify what you're doing a little bit. And I think that then will give you the confidence to lean into what you're doing. And then it lets the play happen even more because you feel secure and you feel confident in what you're doing, you know.
Absolutely. There's one more in here. I have a question as well, but I'm going to ask this one first. You see, I could talk about it all evening. Do you think that children miss out on play at home because of screen time, or kind of that lack of parental shared play? That's from Deirdre. Do you think screen time has, what do you think? I give that to you first, Pete.
Oh, right. I was going to offer it to Leah first, but I'll take the baton. I'll take the baton. Right. What we've always got to remember is that play is quite personal. And so if you ask me about my play experiences growing up in the 1970s, it's going to be very, very different to children's play experiences now. So I grew up with no technology or very limited technology. All my play had to be face to face. It's changed. It's changed, and it's changed from both the positive and the negative. But I think what we've got to accept is that screen time, digital play is becoming a new play type. Mm-hmm. And that, yes, it can reduce the amount of face-to-face, which I think can be quite dangerous, particularly if we're talking about well-being and that. But then we've also got to think of the aspect of atypicality. And actually, COVID showed us this, that a lot of children, particularly those who are diagnosed on the autistic spectrum, actually felt it more comfortable to engage digitally online than having to face a group of people in a room. So, yes, I think that screen time has to be regulated as a parent, as an adult, but I think we have got to accept that actually it's become a type of play and that children can socially interact that maybe they wouldn't socially interact in a more what we term conventional space.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, like I think yes, it can have a very detrimental effect if it's unregulated or not used in a correct way, but it can also be really beneficial. It can be a tool. We can use it to our advantage as well if it's used properly. I also think there's a lot of context has to go around this because we have moved into a different world. A lot of the time now, both parents in the house might be working or might be busier than before, and it has its place where it is giving maybe if the child can spend 1 hour more in the home and in and out of the sitting room while the television is on, is that better than them being maybe in creche for that extra hour? There's other elements because they can be in their kind of more natural environment. So there's so much there that you could have to really analyze each individual's situation. But I do think that yes, it has to be really regulated, but I think we're coming into a new wave where people are more aware of the effects. So I do think it has been a lot more regulated than, for example, 5-6 years ago. I think it was a little bit more like, we didn't really know the guidance on it, whereas now it's clear, yes, let's use this as a tool, let's use it to our advantage, but let's regulate it, like let's really control the volume of it that we're using,
I think you're right. I think it's unrealistic to not expect it in some manner. Like that idea of digital childhoods, we talk about that a lot on the masters. And the research done by Cyber Safe Kids in Ireland on children aged 7 to 12 who have a smartphone, and it's well up in the 90s, 90%. But yeah, it would be unrealistic to not consider it, I suppose. I have a question now, just for the both of you, right? For anyone who, I think we talked a lot, Pete, back in the day about that element of playfulness, right?
Yes.
And I think that doesn't come as easily to some people. Being playful in the classroom. Do either of you have any tips on how to be more playful in the classroom?
I can go first on this one if you want, Pete.
Cool.
I think my first tip on this, and it's something that I really consider, and again, going back to my musical background, but being comfortable with your co-workers. Often when we're working in early years, we are there's, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 adults in the room because of the ratios and that. And I think often that's where we're getting this kind of, not fear, but a little bit of a uncomfortableness of going, oh, I don't know if I want to do this now because, you know, will she be looking at me or whatever. But I think that's actually, for me anyway, that would be the first step, because I say that all the time when I do a lot of CPD for integrating music as well. And I always say, be comfortable around your co-workers. It's very easy to get up and sing a song and, you know, have a bit of a dance with kids. You know, it's often a thing it's easier to do. It's when there's, you know, maybe a practitioner or a worker or someone else there that you get that little bit of, oh. So I think that really having that really good relationship and really positive and welcoming and open work environment where you're all on the same page and you're all, you know, you can have a bit of a laugh with your co-workers and not take yourself too seriously in that context. I think that for me is the biggest thing. That would be my piece.
The most important, yeah. Don't take yourself too seriously, because you can't, if you're being playful, you can't take yourself too seriously. I'd say if people, you know, had walked into my class and I'm sitting with the puppets, they'd look at me and go, oh, I don't know about her now, but you can't take yourself too seriously. What do you think, Pete?
Oh, playfulness is a state of mind. It's an approach. And I think the thing we've always got to be wary of is that not everyone is playful. Not everyone, because it's also a characteristic that I think we have, but some people have it more now. I always say to my students, think about your relatives and who's the one that you always gravitated to. It was always that person that appeared playful. It could have been the aunt, the uncle, the grandmother, the grandfather. But not everyone is like that. And I teach research, and I teach both undergraduate and postgraduate, but particularly at postgraduate. And I use playfulness as part of the approach. But what I learned is that not everyone in that classroom or in that lecture room is comfortable with a playful approach. So it goes back down to having this balance of having the bit of formal, but throwing in a bit of playfulness. So, for example, I bring in a game of Guess Who, and I set the scenario up that the students at level 7, at the most foremost, you know, on the verge of PhD thinking here, and so I need 2 people to have a real test of the minds. And they come up and I sit them down and then I put a game of Guess Who in front of them. And, you know, and I've got, you know, students internationally, you know, all over the world wondering what's going on here. And basically, Guess Who is the most wonderful concept to actually introduce qualitative research in relation to open and closed questions. Because Guess Who is based on closed questioning. And that's how the game lasts. But you get no information because you have to keep asking question after question after question to find out who your character is. If you just say, describe your character for me, Guess Who will be over in seconds. And actually bringing in that game of Guess Who, that aspect of playfulness, I think gives that element of surprise, and people remember things more because of that surprise element. Whereas if I just said closed questions, you get yes, no, or don't know. Open questions, you'll get a more, people will sort of remember it, but they won't be able to sort of pin their hat on the rack because I've given them that framework of Guess Who. But not everyone's comfortable with it. And I think that's the same with children. Not all children are playful. And so it goes back down to, you've got to get to know a bit like us. We get to know our colleagues that we can have a joke with, and the ones that we think, I'll give that one a miss today because I don't think they appreciate my sense of humour. And I think children are the same, and we get to know them. So I get to know my students in my lecture room. I mean, there was one where, you know, I was talking about something and I just turned to someone and I said, have you got any questions? And they all looked at me and I said, I know what you're thinking. Get on with it, Grandad. Now, they know me, that I can say that because I've developed that ration, and they know I'm a bit of an idiot. However, you can't do it unless you know your students or everything else. And I think it goes that you can't really do it unless you know the children or the young people that you work with. But you've also got to have that air of, are they comfortable with it?
Yeah.
And so if I'm comfortable with it.
It's a good point.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Okay, let me just have a look. I'm trying to see if we have any more in here. I'm just conscious of the time. I think that's all the questions we have. Pete and Leah, I want to say thank you so much for joining us this evening. I had a lovely night. I hope all of you enjoyed it. As I said, the recordings will be out soon for this evening, and the CPD certs as well. So thank you very much on behalf of Portobello to you both, and we'll talk to you very soon.